Imagine this. A respected Chinese TV newscaster, famous for her sharp reporting, suddenly disappears under mysterious circumstances. Her online presence vanishes, leaving only one haunting photo behind. Months later, a pregnant woman's body is displayed in a controversial bodyworks exhibit. Is it her? And what if this chilling display is more than just an exhibition? What if it's part of a dark conspiracy to silence her? As the mayor's wife, who runs the plastination factory, is implicated in the plot, the case spirals into a tangled web of corruption, secrets, and cover-ups. Stick around to uncover the shocking truth behind this bizarre disappearance and the conspiracy that might be hiding it. The disappearance of a prominent Chinese TV newscaster sent shockwaves through the media and the public. One moment she was a familiar face, gracing the screens of millions as a respected anchor on national television, and the next, she seemed to vanish into thin air. It wasn't just that she went missing, her entire online presence. Her social media profiles and traces of her existence on the internet were erased, as if someone had scrubbed her from digital history. All that remained was a single, solitary photograph of her, a haunting reminder of her sudden and mysterious disappearance. The story of her vanishing, however, begins with a scandal, one that would set the stage for the chilling events that followed. This newscaster, known for her sharp reporting and professional demeanor, had recently become embroiled in a controversy. She was involved in a confrontation with a prominent mayor, a political figure known for his influence and connections within the city. Sources revealed that the conflict escalated after it was alleged that the mayor had been involved in a secret affair with the newscaster. The affair was rumored to have come to light after the mayor's wife found out and confronted the newscaster. The exact details of their confrontation remain unclear, but what followed was nothing short of unsettling. Shortly after the scandal broke, the newscaster was reported missing. Her disappearance was puzzling. No one knew where she had gone, and her last known whereabouts seemed to vanish into thin air. The police investigation yielded no clear answers. No signs of struggle were found at her home or workplace, and no unusual behavior was reported by those closest to her. Her family and colleagues were left searching for answers. But the case quickly grew cold, leaving investigators with few leads to follow. What made her disappearance even more mysterious was the erasure of her digital footprint. Her social media accounts, previously filled with personal posts and professional updates, were deleted. Her website, once a hub for news and personal information, was taken offline. For someone in the public eye, this was an unprecedented move. It was as if she had simply ceased to exist. The question on everyone's mind was, who had the power to erase her from the digital world so thoroughly, and why? Then, 8 months later, a new twist emerged in the case. A woman, heavily pregnant, was displayed in a controversial bodyworks exhibit. This woman, it was claimed, was the missing newscaster. The exhibit, which featured plastinated bodies preserved through a process called plastination, was intended to showcase human anatomy for educational purposes. But the display of this particular woman, presumed to be the newscaster, raised more questions than answers. Her presence at the exhibit, in such an unusual and unsettling context, only deepened the mystery surrounding her disappearance. How could someone who had been missing for months be suddenly found in such an unexpected location? And if this was indeed the newscaster, how did she end up there? The connection between the missing newscaster and the body in the exhibit began to draw more attention. Many people speculated that the woman in the exhibit was indeed the missing newscaster, but others raised doubts. The body had been preserved in a way that made it impossible to determine her true identity without further examination. The police were alerted to the situation, and forensic experts were called in to investigate whether the body on display could be linked to the missing newscaster. The discovery raised many questions. Was this a case of foul play? Had the newscaster been killed and her body plastinated for some dark purpose? The involvement of the mayor's wife, who also happened to be the manager of the local plastination factory, only added fuel to the fire. Why had the wife of the mayor, someone closely tied to a public official, been involved in the plastination process of a woman who was presumably dead? And what role did she play in the disappearance of the newscaster? Was she an innocent party caught in a web of lies? Or was she complicit in the dark conspiracy that seemed to be unfolding? As the investigation into the plastinated body continued, forensic experts began to piece together several oddities. The body, which was said to be that of the missing newscaster, showed signs of trauma, though the exact nature of the injuries was not immediately clear. No external wounds were found on the body, but there were subtle internal injuries that suggested some form of violence. However, these injuries could not be conclusively linked to a cause of death. Could these marks be the result of a struggle or a violent assault? Or were they an unfortunate side effect of the plastination process itself? The forensic analysis became increasingly complicated, with experts divided on the cause of death. Further tests revealed that the body had been embalmed, but there was an unusual delay in the embalming process. The timing of this delay raised suspicions. Could it be that the embalming was done to cover up a potential crime? The longer investigators spent analyzing the body, the more unanswered questions emerged, leading them to suspect that there was more to the story than anyone had realized. Why was there such an extended delay in embalming the body, and why was the body displayed in such an exhibition? Was it possible that this was a cover-up, an attempt to conceal the true cause of death? In addition to the forensic anomalies, the strange circumstances surrounding the newscaster's disappearance pointed to potential cover-up theories. Some believed that the mayor, whose political career was under threat due to the affair with the newscaster, could have been involved in a cover-up. Could he have orchestrated the disappearance to protect himself from scandal? Was his wife complicit in the plot, helping to erase all traces of the newscaster in an effort to ensure the affair remained hidden? The theory that the mayor and his wife were involved in some form of conspiracy began to gain traction among some investigators, who believed that the disappearance was part of a larger scheme to protect their reputations. Others theorized that the disappearance might have been entirely unrelated to the mayor, perhaps the result of a personal vendetta or an outside influence. Was there a deeper, more complex reason behind the newscaster's disappearance, one that had yet to be revealed? Could there be a connection to a larger network of criminal activity, or was it simply an isolated case of foul play? As the investigation continued, the lack of concrete answers and the growing web of theories began to frustrate both investigators and the public. Why was the newscaster erased from the internet? What happened to her in the months leading up to her disappearance? And why did she end up in a plastination exhibit, her body displayed for all to see? These were questions that loomed large, with no easy answers in sight. With the involvement of powerful figures like the mayor and his wife, who had the means and the connections to conceal the truth, the case raised uncomfortable questions about institutional secrecy and the power of those in positions of authority to manipulate the truth. Was this case part of a larger cover-up, or was it simply an unfortunate tragedy that had been obscured by circumstances? The investigation continues, but the truth remains elusive. The unanswered questions grow, and with each new revelation, the possibility of a conspiracy deepens. Could the true story of the newscaster's disappearance ever be fully revealed, or will it remain hidden in the shadows forever? As investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, the case of the missing Chinese TV anchor grew even more convoluted. With each new development, the mystery surrounding her disappearance deepened. The plastination exhibit where the body was displayed became a focal point in the investigation. Investigators sought to understand how a highly publicized missing person could end up as part of a controversial exhibition. Was it a coincidence, or did this have deeper, more sinister implications? The body on display had been meticulously preserved, and it was clear that the process had been carried out by experts. The plastination factory, managed by the mayor's wife, raised suspicions as investigators examined the links. Between her role in the exhibition and the disappearance of the newscaster, was the body truly hers? If so, why was it not reported as a victim of a crime? Why had the body been embalmed and preserved without notifying authorities of the death? A process that seemed to intentionally avoid detection by the police. As forensic experts continued to analyze the body, they discovered further unsettling details. The chemical composition of the body indicated that it had been preserved at a much higher rate of preservation than usual, something that seemed to suggest that the body had been intentionally prepared for display. While most bodies in plastination exhibits are preserved for educational purposes, this particular case seemed out of the ordinary. The careful treatment of the body pointed to a more calculated effort to maintain secrecy. Tension rose as investigators focused more on the role of the mayor's wife. Could she have been involved in the disappearance? She was, after all, the manager of the plastination factory, which was involved in the body's preservation. Could she have facilitated the process as part of a cover-up? Or was she simply part of a much larger conspiracy that had successfully manipulated the evidence? Meanwhile, another piece of evidence emerged that stunned everyone involved in the investigation. The only known photo of the newscaster, which had mysteriously appeared online after her disappearance, was found to have been digitally altered. Investigators had assumed that the image was authentic. But digital experts uncovered signs of manipulation in the photo's metadata. The realization that the dud image had been altered suggested that someone had actively tried to control the narrative of the newscaster's disappearance, reinforcing suspicions that the case was not as simple as it initially appeared. When the alterations to the photo have been an attempt to create a false trail, a cover-up orchestrated by powerful figures who didn't want the truth to come out. The tampering of digital evidence opened a new line of questioning. Who had the knowledge and the resources to manipulate such an image? Was it the mayor, the mayor's wife, or someone else in a position of power? The investigation into the disappearance also revealed several anomalies regarding the newscaster's personal life. While she had appeared publicly as a professional, respected journalist, those who knew her reported that she had been under immense stress in the months leading up to her disappearance. Investigators found that she had been receiving threatening messages from unknown sources, messages that were cryptic and unsettling, which she had not shared with the public or her colleagues. Was this part of a larger effort to intimidate her into silence, or was she merely caught up in something much bigger than herself? Her colleagues in the newsroom, many of whom were shocked by her sudden disappearance, began to open up about their interactions with her. They recalled that the newscaster had seemed increasingly anxious and secretive in the weeks leading up to her vanishing. One colleague revealed that the newscaster had confided in her about an ongoing investigation she had been working on, one that involved high-profile political figures in the city. Could this investigation have been the reason she was targeted? Was her disappearance linked to her professional work rather than her personal life? The increasing complexity of the case led investigators to consider several theories. The first theory suggested that the newscaster had been involved in a larger political conspiracy, potentially involving corruption or illegal activities at the highest levels of government. If she had been investigating powerful figures, her disappearance could have been a way to silence her before she exposed damaging information. The mayor, with his influence, could have played a central role in orchestrating her disappearance to prevent her from revealing the truth. Another theory involved the possibility that the newscaster had become entangled in a personal vendetta. If the affair with the mayor had been more than just a scandal, it had escalated into something far more dangerous. Perhaps her disappearance had been a result of the mayor's need to protect his reputation. In this theory, the mayor's wife could have played a more active role, using her access to the plastination factory to help hide the body and prevent the authorities from discovering the truth. A third, more chilling theory suggested that the newscaster may have been targeted by someone outside of the political sphere, someone with a personal motive that is not immediately apparent. Could her disappearance have been tied to a more personal conflict, perhaps involving someone from her past? The body in the exhibit seemed to suggest that the newscaster's death was not a random act, but a carefully planned and executed scheme. The fact that her body had been preserved and displayed as part of the plastination exhibit pointed to an intentional effort to control the story, to keep the truth hidden. Despite the mounting evidence, investigators struggled to make sense of the larger picture. There were still too many unanswered questions, and the conspiracy seemed to run deeper than anyone could have imagined. As the investigation continued, the case became even more convoluted, with new leads and theories emerging at every turn. Was the truth behind the newscaster's disappearance something that would ever be fully uncovered? Or would the powerful forces at play ensure that it remained hidden forever? The involvement of the mayor and his wife in the disappearance raised disturbing questions about institutional corruption, power, and the lengths to which people would go to protect their secrets. The public, increasingly skeptical of the authorities' ability to solve the case, began to demand answers. Would the truth about the disappearance ever be revealed? or would those responsible manage to cover up their actions? As more evidence came to light, one thing became clear. The investigation into the missing newscaster was far from over, and the case would continue to unfold in unexpected ways. Was this a case of political cover-up, or something even darker at play? Could the mayor and his wife truly be involved in a conspiracy to hide the truth about the newscaster's disappearance? The questions surrounding the case were endless, and the answers, if they ever came, would likely reveal something far more sinister than anyone could have imagined. The investigation into the mysterious disappearance of the Chinese TV anchor would continue to haunt those involved as they sought to uncover the truth. There was an overwhelming sense of urgency among law enforcement to uncover the full scope of the mystery. With each passing day, the complexity of the case became more apparent. New questions arose that led investigators down several unforeseen paths. One of the most perplexing aspects was the relationship between the missing newscaster and the mayor's wife, the manager of the plastination factory. Was there a deeper connection between them than just the factory and the exhibit? Had they known each other for years? Or had the mayor's wife been involved in the affair more than the public was led to believe? To answer these questions, investigators began to dig into the mayor's wife's background, looking for any clues that could shed light on her involvement in the disappearance. They discovered a number of unsettling details about her past, including a history of manipulation and secrecy. Despite being in a position of power, she had managed to keep a low profile in the public eye, but several former employees from the plastination factory had come forward with testimony that painted a darker picture of her personality. They spoke of her controlling nature, how she used her position to influence and intimidate those around her, and how she had connections that reached far beyond the factory itself. Law enforcement also started to consider the possibility that the mayor's wife might have had more to gain than simply protecting her husband's reputation. Financial records revealed that she had taken out large sums of money from her personal accounts in the months leading up to the disappearance. Could this financial activity have been tied to a larger scheme to hide the evidence and further protect herself? Was she preparing to cover up not just a personal scandal, but a far-reaching conspiracy that implicated multiple people, including the mayor himself? As more pieces of the puzzle came together, investigators began to examine the timeline surrounding the newscaster's disappearance more closely. They retraced her last known movements, piecing together phone records, emails, and witnesses who had seen her shortly before she vanished. The timeline revealed a disturbing series of events. On the day of her disappearance, she had been in contact with several high-profile individuals, including the mayor's office and other political figures. These conversations seemed to hint at a desperate attempt to resolve the escalating scandal before it spiraled out of control. The newscaster had also been in touch with a private investigator in the weeks leading up to her disappearance. This individual, a former law enforcement officer, was hired by the newscaster to look into the mayor's activities and his connections. Could it be that the newscaster had been close to uncovering something even more sinister than a personal affair? Was she on the brink of exposing a corrupt network that extended beyond just the mayor and his wife? The investigators' involvement raised yet another disturbing possibility. The newscaster might have been silenced to prevent her from revealing these secrets to the public. However, there was still a major roadblock for the investigation: the lack of a definitive cause of death for the body displayed in the plastination exhibit. Although forensic experts had conducted several tests, they could not conclusively determine if the woman in the exhibit had been murdered or died of natural causes. No obvious signs of violence were found on the body, though experts noted that the preservation process could have concealed critical evidence. The body was so meticulously preserved that it was impossible to determine the time of death with certainty. This led to more questions. Could the body in the exhibit truly be that of the missing newscaster, or was it someone else entirely? If it was her, what happened in the months between her disappearance and the exhibit's opening? Was she killed and then preserved for the exhibit as part of a larger, calculated plan to conceal the truth? In response to mounting public pressure, the authorities took the unprecedented step of seeking help from international forensic experts. A team of independent specialists was brought in to re-examine the body and perform more advanced tests. Among the new forensic techniques used was DNA testing, which could potentially provide definitive proof of the newscaster's identity and the true cause of death. The results of these tests would ultimately reveal the truth. But for now, the investigation remained shrouded in uncertainty. One potential lead that began to gain traction was the theory that the disappearance might have been a coordinated effort by several parties within the government to silence the newscaster. The mayor, already a controversial figure, may have had the motive and resources to orchestrate the plot. But what about the other individuals who seemed to be involved? Was this part of a larger cover-up involving powerful figures within the local government? The fact that so many key pieces of evidence pointed to the mayor, his wife, and the plastination factory raised suspicions that this wasn't just a personal vendetta but a well-constructed operation to suppress any potential threats to their political and financial power. As the investigation grew more complex, the idea of a cover-up started to seem more plausible. The multiple layers of secrecy, manipulation, financial gain suggested that this disappearance could be linked to a broader political conspiracy. Could the mayor, his wife, and others in power have orchestrated the newscaster's disappearance, not just to protect their own reputations, but to maintain control over the narrative? With the evidence of financial irregularities and the mysterious connections between the mayor's wife and the plastination factory, the case was beginning to take on a new dimension. As investigators continued to follow leads, they were forced to confront uncomfortable truths about the power structures within the city. The potential for corruption at the highest levels of government was becoming clearer. As investigators worked tirelessly to uncover the truth, these questions loomed large. The case had the potential to expose a dangerous web of power, corruption, and deceit that could extend far beyond the boundaries of the city. But with so many unanswered questions, the case seemed to be getting more tangled by the day. The one thing that was clear, this was not just a simple case of a missing person. It was a complex web of lies, cover-ups, and corruption, and the answers may not come easily. As the investigation pushed forward, the pressure on the authorities to find answers intensified. Public outrage over the mysterious disappearance of the newscaster grew, especially as more evidence pointed toward possible foul play at the hands of those in power. The public's faith in the investigation began to erode as more questions arose about the involvement of high-ranking officials. Was the mayor truly just a bystander in this affair? Or was he the mastermind behind the plot to silence the newscaster? Was his wife, the manager of the plastination factory, merely an accomplice? Or had she been a driving force behind this horrific scheme? In an attempt to clear up some of these questions, investigators turned to the mayor's financial records. What they uncovered was alarming. It appeared that the mayor and his wife had been using their connections to funnel large sums of money into various accounts, many of which were linked to entities they controlled. Some of these accounts were registered under the names of anonymous shell companies, making it difficult to track the exact flow of money. Was this an attempt to launder money? Or was it evidence of something darker, a secret fund designed to facilitate illicit activities? Could the body in the exhibit really be that of the missing newscaster? Or was it someone else entirely? Was the plastination process used to conceal evidence of a murder? Or was there another explanation? Despite the growing evidence of corruption, investigators struggled to connect all the dots. The absence of physical evidence linking the newscaster's disappearance directly to the mayor or his wife remained a major obstacle. The lack of any clear eyewitness testimony and the absence of definitive forensic evidence made it difficult for the police to make a decisive move. It appeared that the case was being deliberately obstructed, with key players working behind the scenes to cover their tracks. One potential lead surfaced when investigators spoke with an anonymous whistleblower who claimed to have worked inside the plastination factory. The whistleblower described a suspicious operation involving the transportation of bodies into the factory late at night. The bodies, according to the informant, were often delivered without proper documentation and were sometimes stored for weeks before being preserved. The informant also mentioned that some bodies were being preserved in a way that was highly unusual, far more intricate and detailed than typical plastination. Could these bodies have been linked to victims of foul play? their deaths concealed behind the facade of a scientific exhibit? As investigators pursued this lead, they discovered that the factory had a series of hidden rooms, sections of the building that were off-limits to most employees. These rooms, which were heavily guarded, were rumored to be used for special projects involving the preservation of high-profile individuals. Was the newscaster one of those individuals? Had she been targeted because of her potential to expose corruption? Or was her involvement more personal, linked to the affair with the mayor? No answers came easily, but the revelations only deepened the mystery. At the same time, investigators began to look into the political ramifications of the case. If the mayor was involved in orchestrating the newscaster's disappearance, it would have a significant impact on his political career. His ties to powerful individuals in the city had kept him in office for years. But as the investigation progressed, it became clear that his grip on power was slipping. His reputation, once considered untouchable, was now in jeopardy. Was he attempting to protect his own interests, or was he simply trying to shield his wife from exposure? As the investigation drew more attention, the public demanded answers. The media, once focused on the scandal surrounding the mayor, began to turn its attention to the police's handling of the case. Some reporters raised the possibility that the authorities were either incompetent or complicit in the cover-up, and the public was quick to join in the chorus of discontent. What if the police had been manipulated into closing the case prematurely, or worse, had been directly involved in silencing the truth? Was there a broader conspiracy at play, with people in power trying to control the narrative and prevent any further investigations into the missing newscaster's fate? As law enforcement continued to follow the money trail and question witnesses, they stumbled upon a series of irregularities in the mayor's personal records. One such irregularity involved a series of off-the-books transactions with a company that dealt in exotic art and body preservation. The company's owner had connections to several high-profile individuals in the city, but the exact nature of the transactions remained unclear. Was the mayor involved in something deeper, perhaps a network of corruption that used body exhibits as a cover for money laundering, or even worse, human trafficking? The case had begun as a simple disappearance, but it was quickly morphing into something far more sinister. The mayor's wife, the plastination factory, the hidden financial records, and the mysterious body in the exhibit all pointed toward something much larger than anyone had anticipated. Was this a case of personal vendetta, a political cover-up, or a far-reaching conspiracy to protect powerful individuals from exposure? As the investigation continued, one thing became clear. The disappearance of the newscaster was far from a simple case. It was tied to a web of deceit, corruption, and power, and the truth might be more elusive than anyone had imagined. Could the mayor, his wife, and the others involved in this dark web ever be held accountable for their actions? Or would they continue to operate behind the scenes, their secrets hidden from the world? The investigation remained open, but with each passing day, the truth seemed further out of reach. The case of the missing Chinese TV anchor was turning into a political and personal nightmare for those involved, and the secrets surrounding it might never be fully uncovered. The questions remained. Was the newscaster dead, or was she hidden away, preserved for a larger, more disturbing purpose? Only time would tell if the pieces of the puzzle would finally come together, or if the case would continue to unravel, leaving the truth just out of reach. As the investigation continued to unfold, more disturbing details about the case emerged. With pressure mounting from the public, the authorities could no longer avoid the growing questions surrounding the involvement of high-profile figures. The mayor's wife, whose connections and role in the plastination factory raised suspicion, had become a central figure in the investigation. Could she really be the mastermind behind such an elaborate scheme? Or was she merely a pawn in a larger conspiracy? Despite the lack of clear evidence linking the mayor to the newscaster's disappearance, investigators began to explore his connections to people with shady backgrounds, including some with ties to the world of body preservation. The discovery of off-the-books transactions with the body preservation company and its links to the mayor's office suggested that the factory could be part of something more sinister. Was it possible that the plastination factory had been involved in illegal activities, using preserved bodies to conceal the truth behind the newscaster's fate? As law enforcement looked deeper into the plastination factory, They uncovered disturbing records that indicated the mayor's wife had signed off on multiple secret projects that involved the preservation of bodies in unusual circumstances. Among these records was an anonymous report detailing how the factory had preserved bodies without the proper documentation, and how some of these bodies were not acquired through lawful means. The growing evidence painted a chilling picture of how these preserved bodies might have been used to cover up a much larger network of crime and deceit. In the meantime, the search for answers continued to reveal even more unsettling details about the newscaster's life. It was discovered that she had been in possession of sensitive documents related to the mayor's office, documents that could have exposed corruption within the local government. Did the newscaster's investigation into these political activities make her a target? Had she uncovered something that the mayor and his wife were willing to go to any lengths to protect? One theory began to gain more traction than the others. Some investigators believed that the newscaster had stumbled upon something so significant, so damaging to powerful individuals, that she was eliminated to prevent her from exposing the truth. But the manner in which she was disposed of, her body's preservation and the plastination exhibit, seemed to suggest a message. Her disappearance wasn't simply a means of silencing her. It was an effort to erase her completely, to remove any trace of her existence, as if she had never been. As the case gained more media attention, the mayor's wife and her potential involvement in the plastination process became the subject of intense scrutiny. Investigative journalists began digging deeper into her personal background and the factory's activities. What they uncovered was a history of financial irregularities, secret deals, and unexplained disappearances that seemed to point to a much darker operation. The media also began to report on the missing newscaster's pregnancy, revealing that she had been 8 months pregnant at the time of her disappearance. Could this be another motive for her disappearance? Was her pregnancy part of a plan to tie her more deeply to the mayor, or a secret affair? Or was her pregnancy a factor in her eventual demise, leading those who feared her potential to expose them to act more swiftly? The fact that her body had been preserved and displayed as part of a body works exhibit raised serious ethical and legal questions about her treatment. As forensic experts examined the body more closely, they began to find more anomalies, though the body was preserved through plastination. The DNA testing on the remains failed to produce a conclusive result, raising suspicions that the body may not belong to the missing newscaster after all. Could this be an elaborate decoy, a way to draw attention away from the real crime? The lack of clear identification made the case even more convoluted, and with every turn, more questions were raised about the factory's involvement in the plot. Investigators and forensic specialists worked around the clock to examine the remains more closely. They employed advanced DNA testing, forensic pathology, and digital technology to try to uncover the identity of the body. The fact that no conclusive evidence had been found pointed to the possibility that there had been an intentional effort to tamper with the body and its forensic evidence, perhaps as a way to prevent authorities from discovering the truth. The case began to escalate in both public interest and official scrutiny. Questions arose about how deep the conspiracy went. Was the mayor's wife truly at the center of a well-organized criminal network, using the plastination factory as a cover for much more sinister activities? Or was there a broader, more systematic corruption at play, involving multiple players in the political and business worlds? The more investigators uncovered, the more they realized that they were dealing with a far-reaching conspiracy, one that may have implicated individuals at every level of local government and private business. As the investigation continued, public trust in the authorities began to wane. Many believed that those in power were using their influence to prevent the truth from coming to light. The mayor's connections, his wife's control of the plastination factory, and the unusual circumstances surrounding the newscaster's disappearance raised serious doubts about the integrity of the investigation. Could the authorities truly be trusted to investigate this case without outside interference? Was the local government complicit in hiding the truth? Theories continued to circulate, with some pointing to the possibility that the newscaster's death was part of a larger network of bodies being used in controversial exhibits. Could the plastination factory have been running an underground operation, using preserved bodies for illicit purposes such as trafficking or exploitation? The more evidence investigators uncovered, the more it seemed that the case was far more complex than anyone had anticipated. Yet despite all the leads and mounting evidence, the case remained unsolved. The truth remained elusive, hidden behind layers of secrecy, corruption, and manipulation. As law enforcement pressed forward with the investigation, the public watched with growing uncertainty. Would the full extent of the conspiracy ever be revealed? Was the mayor and his wife just the tip of the iceberg? Or had they been the masterminds behind a larger operation to silence those who threatened their power? The disappearance of the Chinese TV anchor was not just a case of a missing person. It was a complex and disturbing mystery that seemed to go far beyond a simple crime. And as the investigation unfolded, it only deepened the mystery surrounding her vanishing. Who was truly responsible for her disappearance? And could the forces at play ever be fully uncovered? These questions haunted the investigation as it continued to evolve, leaving everyone involved with more questions than answers. The deeper the investigators dug, the more they realized that the truth was far more disturbing than they had imagined. Would the answers ever be found? Or would the powerful forces involved in this case continue to keep the truth buried forever? The search for answers seemed endless, and only time would tell what would be uncovered next. As the investigation continued, new leads began to surface that further complicated the already convoluted case. Investigators shifted their focus to a series of anonymous phone calls that had been made in the weeks leading up to the newscaster's disappearance. These calls, initially dismissed as unimportant, now seemed to hold crucial information. One of the calls had been made to a high-ranking police officer in the city, warning him to stay away from the case. The voice on the other end of the phone was calm and controlled, but the message was clear. The truth will not be uncovered. Leave it alone. This phone call immediately raised questions about the level of influence that was being exerted over the investigation. Was the police officer who received the call being threatened? And more importantly, who had the power to interfere so directly in a high-profile investigation? Was this just one of many attempts by those in power to cover up the truth? The authorities were now forced to confront the unsettling possibility that there was a far-reaching network working behind the scenes to control the investigation and prevent any further discoveries. The pressure on law enforcement continued to mount as suspicions grew that the investigation itself was being compromised. Investigators began to look into the relationships between key players in the case, including the mayor's wife and the local police department. Could the mayor's wife, with her connections to the plastination factory, have used her influence to manipulate the investigation? Or was the entire case being sabotaged by powerful figures who had something to lose if the truth came out? Meanwhile, another piece of evidence emerged that stunned everyone involved in the investigation. The only known photo of the newscaster, which had mysteriously appeared online after her disappearance, was found to have been digitally altered. Investigators had assumed that the image was authentic. But digital experts uncovered signs of manipulation in the photo's metadata. The realization that the dud image had been altered suggested that someone had actively tried to control the narrative of the newscaster's disappearance, reinforcing suspicions that the case was not as simple as it initially appeared. When the alterations to the photo have been an attempt to create a false trail, a cover-up orchestrated by powerful figures who didn't want the truth to come out.